I'm so glad to meet you today, Nandini. Hi, good evening. How are you doing?
Hi, honey. I'm doing really well.
Nandini, let me tell you. So we are bringing in a lot of investors every month, to our startups and entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs especially, to understand behind the scenes of fundraising. And we are trying to create this awareness so that, they don't face those struggles that, earlier entrepreneurs are facing. So, and they have all the information on their plate. So thank you so much for joining in today. I am so excited to have the conversation with you and
Thank you for having me.
understand more in detail how you're working, how you're helping so many entrepreneurs out there with their funding, and apart from that, also their growth. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for accepting the invitation. So Nandini, do tell us more about your experience and your background so that each one of us is aware more in depth.
Okay. So, a little bit about me before we start out with what is Mumbai Angels. So, I have been an angel investor and a serial entrepreneur since 2010. So, that's before that I was an investment banker with JP Morgan. I was, in various roles in the Times of India group. And so between these two, I have about 12 plus years of experience. And it is in 2010 that I decided that, okay, now is time for me to start out on my own. What you guys must know is that when I started out, the business plan that I started out on, saying that, okay, I'm quitting my job because I want to do something of my own, that died on an Excel sheet 2 weeks after I quit. Yeah. So between 2010 to say 2017, I have actually tried to set up and failed and succeeded bits and pieces. Uh, I would say at least 5 to 6 ventures. Yeah? Some died at the Excel sheet stage. Some died because of partnership issues. So that's actually one of the key things that all of you should look out for whenever you're doing your startups. And then 2 did well, but I think they were again before time. So I started a network for people to invest in content. So that was called Idea Booster. I think that was an idea well before its time. So, that didn't work. The other thing that I did that actually got a lot of traction was called Digi Booster. This was a marketplace. So earlier it was a marketplace to sell content, and then later on it became a marketplace for influencers. And this was something that had started getting a lot of traction, but COVID hit. So what happened is that since it was an advertising model, we had to take a call on saying, should we go ahead at this point or should we step back? So me and my investor, and I had a CEO, very good friend of mine, who was running that venture. All 3 of us, we decided this is the right time to shut it. So, I'm a very proud holder of that tag of 2 to 3 failed ventures, because I think that's the best place that you can learn anything. Now, while I was doing this, is 2010 itself is when I started investing. I started investing as an individual angel investor through Mumbai Angels. So I was one of the members there. And I have, through them, I would have built a portfolio of about 10 to 12 companies. And then we started, I started getting more involved with the network. So I am not one of the original co-founders. It was started by 2 very dear friends, Sasha Michandani and Prashant Choksi. I was one of the members, and then then I became more involved. I became a part of the board, and it's about in 2017 is when we decided that the entire ecosystem by then had changed. It was no longer smaller networks of friends who could come together and look at investments. This had to be done at scale, and it had to be done in a very professional way. So that is when I came in as the 3rd co-founder, and today I'm the operating partner and the CEO. So I run the network, and Prashant and Sasha, of course, are on the part of, or they are part of the board, and they are, they are there to get the guidance whenever. Yeah. So that's about me. Let me tell you a little bit about Mumbai Angels. So you'll get an idea of what the network is and what we do. So we are now about 15 years old, and we are one of the first networks in the country. and we are also one of the networks in the country that has a premium membership attached to it, which means that investors can only come and see deals on our platform or become a part of our membership base if they are paying a certain fee. So what you are seeing is a very curated set of people who are interested in doing angel investing. Today we have a portfolio of about 170 companies, of which about 60 of them have already seen exits. So we also have that understanding of the network through and through. From a founder's perspective, because I understand this is a platform that has more founders than investors. What we do is we are almost the first check cutters onto in a company. When I say first check cutters, I mean we come after, say, the friends and family round. So if you have raised, a certain amount to start your company, and you've raised, say, you put your own money, you put your friends, family money, and you've done, say, about 20-30 lakhs has already gone in. And now you see that, look, I am at that place where I need external money, which is the seed funding or the angel funding round, which is anywhere between a 50 lakh to, say, $1 million. Our sweet spot, or the place where we do the majority of deals, is anywhere between 50 lakhs to 2 crores, right? So what happens is that a startup comes to us and they apply to us for funding. We see about 1,000 startups a month, and from there we shortlist and we bring it down to about I would say 15 to 16 startups a month. So that's the kind of curation that happens from 1,000 to 15 to 16. And then these are shown to our network of investors. And so we have about 550 investors, and then people will look at it and take their individual call on whether they want to invest in these companies or not. And at any given time, about, say, I would say 10 to 30 investors would put the money in. And that money would come, maybe a few people putting larger checks of, say, 25 to 50 lakhs, but the majority would be people putting 5 to 10 lakhs. So then that's how, you would have about 10 people putting, say, 5 lakhs, and then the rest is done by 2 large investors. So that's how we do it. And then our role actually begins from there. So I keep saying that, this startup investing is about the exits. It's not about investing, because investing is the place where everybody is very happy and everyone's like, oh, this is looking very good. But then you move to a place where you work with the company. So we monitor the company. We work with the company for, the 3-4 years when they are looking to raise their next round. And then we try and guide them and try and participate in the exit or the next round.
That is so true that you mentioned it's all about exits for the startup and not investments. But that is very rare for most of them out there to understand. But yeah, that is the hard truth of the agenda. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Nandini, do tell us, how did you get your first investor to join Mumbai Angels in the network?
So see, like I mentioned, this was started in 2006, and it was actually started by, a group of friends. So actually, there were lots of these smaller networks in the country, and at that time there were even much, the reason why we are called Mumbai Angels is because we started from Mumbai. And today we are a global network. So we have, investors from about 40 cities and 10 different countries. So today Mumbai Angels is just a concept. It's not a local network. But all local networks that started out at that point were trying to copy the US model, where there are, these very, very local networks across the country. So that is how it came up. So the first 7, 8 or 10 people were actually friends who came together and said, okay, let's start co-investing in companies.
That is amazing. So what were the sectors at that point of time, or what kind of business at that point of time did this group of people invest in to begin with?
Yeah, so see, one of the India's first unicorn, InMobi, was one of our first investments. So yeah, so that's one of the key successes that we have. Myntra was also one of our first investments, but of course that was the time when it was a very different in a very different avatar than what it is today. We also did, so at that time also we did a lot of different sectors. We did something in media, we did something in content. But at that point, I think because you were trying to replicate the US model, there was a lot more tech focus in investing, because we said that in the US there is a certain profile of an investor. So at that time we were looking at mostly technology products as a focus, and a certain profile of founders, which we were trying to replicate from the US. See? Today, if I cut today, it's a very different ballgame. Today we see founders from all kinds of age groups, all kinds of backgrounds. You're not just looking for IIT IIMs, you're looking for more the ability to execute, and if the idea is large enough. And you're also, today we are sector agnostic. So even that time we were sector agnostic, but we were still going technology focused. Today we are tech and not tech. So we do a lot of consumer, we do a lot of healthcare, we do a lot of travel, and not all of it is tech enabled also. So it's a huge mix.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's very interesting. So do tell us, how do you evaluate your investors when you say you are a premium, it's a group of investors where you actually onboard them based on fees. So how do you onboard them? What is your eligibility criteria to onboard an investor on your platform?
See, first and foremost, they need to be willing to invest the time and energy to understand this asset class. That is very important. What happens is that money is of course important. Without it, you can't be an investor, right? So that is a given. So if I say you're looking at people who have the ability to invest, that's a given. But for us, it is more important to say, is the investor willing to understand the asset class, give the time? And, because what happens is that angel investing is about people choosing companies. So if we will show people 4 companies, which we do, on a weekly basis, you will have to go out there and choose 1 or 2 of them, which one I want to invest in. And that comes from the ability to give time and the intent to understand this. So that for us is very big. Referrals is very important. So we see that there is a strong, thing of people, when they join in, they want their friends to join in. The other big piece that we are doing is that we are reaching out to family offices. So we started seeing that family offices have started becoming very, very interested in this asset class. So they are also on our networks.
Truly interesting to understand, what are the requirements of an investor as well, because it is an equally important part of the startup industry, and we need to understand, and entrepreneurs need to keep themselves in their shoes and understand what they're expecting out of them. So that is very important. Thank you for sharing that. So do tell us, what are the historical return on investments through your network of angel investors?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to give out our specific returns, but what I can talk to you about is so what we've started doing, not just us, but several peers, people who are active in this, is to now start looking at saying, okay, look at it as an asset class. So you don't invest in a single company, you invest in several companies and you look at it. So for all startups, it's very important to understand that, to understand who you are, forget about what the investor is looking at. Who are you? You are a Flipkart before it's become Flipkart. Yeah, you're a Zomato before it's become Zomato. And why do people put money on it year on year, rounds after rounds, is because they see a certain wealth or a return that is coming to them. So for us, we look at it saying, okay, if you put money in a basket of these investments, some of these will become unicorns. Okay. But the idea is not to just go out there and try and look for unicorns, because I don't think that's the way to build the entire ecosystem. What you do is you say, okay, if you do a basket and you keep investing, in several investments, we see that the return over there are sitting somewhere around, say, 30 to 32% for an individual investor, which if you, for any of you who invests in the stock market, will know that that number sits at about 15. So this is almost double. And then there will be some of these companies that will become, even if they don't become unicorns, they will give you outsized returns over a period. So we have companies, which have given you as high as 200% return. Some which, and several in the last year itself have given us 68% return, 120% return. So that whole range exists. But on an overall basis, when an investor is coming into this asset class, they are expecting around 30 to 32%.
Wow, that is huge. So do tell us, what makes this angel network different than any other angel networks that are available, all over the globe. Do tell us about, what.
Yeah. So, see, we are known for a couple of things. One, we are known for our experience. So there are very few networks in the country that actually have seen the full cycle. So like I mentioned, it's not about investments, it's about exits. What has happened during our, building of 170 portfolio is we've actually understood what works and what doesn't work with the investor. What works with the investor is their ability to trust a network on its transparency, on its processes, and the amount of work that the network is willing to do on each investment. So that is something that we are known for. We are also known for the amount of work that we do on our portfolio. So like I mentioned, it's not just the first time when you sign on the dotted line, but the 4-5 years that you do. So we are known for the way we manage our portfolio. We are known for the way we actually navigate the next round of investing, the Series A, the exits that happen. So we are primarily known for quality and execution.
Interesting. So you have already shared with us how, you initially you look at the startups who are already, you have raised a family, friends and family round, and then they are going for the seed round is one of the eligibility criteria. To elaborate about the criteria for the startups, to get selected for this kind of network.
So, I think that's a very interesting question. And I always say that, I think there are at least 100 different criteria that one would look at, and that comes from it's almost a knowledge that we have built over a period of years to say, okay, what will work? And we look at it not just the function of when a startup applies to us, but we also have the data to look at saying which companies actually gave us good exits. So we actually select companies basis what the exit data has been. But to highlight a few, and of course you guys would have heard this over and over again, that we say founder quality, the market size, those I think are a given. So I think by now the thing, like you mentioned in the beginning, that this generation of entrepreneurs already know those basics. So we are no longer worried about that. What I will focus on are some of the things that might be useful, might be good takeaways from you guys for people who are here. One is full-time commitment. So if you are building something where you are just doing part-time and you're saying, oh, I'm doing a job and I also want to do this, or I'm not doing this full-time, I'm doing this. The investor wants to see you fully committed before they'll commit the money. That's number one. Secondly is the complementary skill set that is available. So if you are a single founder, do you have a team around you that is complementary? Or better still, because you'll be raising money at a much earlier stage, is do you have co-founders who have complementary skills? So we've seen that works quite well. So it's not that we don't fund single founder companies, but what we have seen is that if there is a team, it tends to work a lot better. The other third thing, and I want to stress on this a little more, because I see several founders actually don't understand the financial bit when they come to us, is you need to have a financial understanding of your business. Don't just talk concepts. You need to understand how you will make money, what is the profitability, how much cash will you burn, what is the valuation, why are you talking about this valuation, how will you get the wealth creation, what will be the exit. Those things are, I mean, the minute any of you are deciding to be an entrepreneur, what you need to know is that you can no longer afford to say, this is my skill set, this is not my skill set. Everything is your skill set. So you need to be a tech guy, you need to be a sales guy, you need to understand finance if you're wanting to do it by yourself. If not, 2-3 people between them need to understand all these things together. Very, very critical. The other thing that is very important here is what is the capital table looking like, which means how much percentage of the shares do the founders have between them before they come to a platform like us. So what happens is that a lot of founders we see give off too much equity before even the seed round, and they've not understood the value of the equity. So what has happened is that when you come in, you are, less than 50%. So if you are a less than 50% of the cap table, the seed investor is not going to be interested, because what happens is that you get diluted round after round, and what the investors want is that the founder should have a large enough equity base with themselves to be interested in the business as it grows. So these are some of the very critical things that we look at. You should not be having any litigation, against you or against the company, because that the minute the due diligence happens and there are red flags, doesn't matter how good the opportunity is, the deal will get dropped.
That's very interesting. I'm recently meeting a lot of startups which are asking a question that what about the single founded startups? When you mentioned, it clicked me that do tell us about what kind of sectors you have invested in where there were only single founders in the early stage.
So look, I don't think it's a sector specific question. It's a call that we take as investors. So like I mentioned, if you are a single founder company, you need to be able to convince us that you'll be able to run this as it grows. So basically what are the investors saying? That we are putting money behind the team that will run it. That's the primary call that an investor takes, right? To say, I'm not going to run this company. I'm giving you the money because I think that you are best suited, you are the right person to grow this. Correct? That's what an investor is looking at. You need to be able to convince that, look, I'll be able to run this all by myself. So very tough. What I can say up front is it's very, very tough for anybody to convince that, listen, I'm a single person. If you are a single founder, you need to be able to convince the investor that I'll be able to run this company on my own. Very tough to do it. So what you will do is that you should have at least 2 or 3 people around you who you think will run this thing along with you. The question that I will always ask is to say that why is somebody coming in at such an early stage in a company without equity? So that question keeps going back and forth. But yeah, you basically need to convince the investor that, look, I can run this on my own. I can grow this on my own.
The insights are truly amazing from your end. I mean, very insightful for me, very eye-opening as well. Understanding about, how difficult it may be for a single founder to be, get on a path of funding. But do tell us, do you have any examples that you may think of a single co-founder? Because recently I have experienced this as a challenge where single founders are very scared to go out and say, oh, hey, I'm looking for funding and I can do it all by myself.
So I don't want to give out names from my portfolio, but we have companies. So it's not that. It's not a no-go. It's not saying, oh, the funding will not happen. Mm-hmm. It is just that you need to convince, saying that, listen, it's me and this team around me. If you're only standing there saying it's me, then your idea better be so good that, the investor says, yeah, it doesn't matter, I'm going to put the money. So it has to be either a person, is being able to convince, saying, I will be being able to do it, or you're saying that, listen, I will build the team. I have these 4-5 guys who are waiting in the corner who will join the minute there is money. So that you'll have to go that route.
It's really good to know that it's not a no-go.
It's not a no-go. It's more tough is all I would like to highlight.
So do tell us the difference between, the COVID situation when hit. What was the situation in this industry before and post-COVID? Can you tell us, few points which were, very much accessible before COVID, but now it's not?
Yeah. So I think COVID was one of the best years that we had as a network. So the good news for all founders who are looking to raise money is that there is no dearth of money for good ideas. And we saw that even during COVID. So, March 2020, I was worried myself that, is funding going to reduce? Are investors going to get less interested? Nothing like that happened. So what we saw is that we actually did more deals during COVID than we did before. We actually onboarded more members to invest through our network during that, and we are seeing the same trend continue even right now. So see, what happens is the angel investor who's investing at such an early stage in a company is a long-term investor. He or she is not worried about the next 6 months. What he or she is worried about is to say that do you have the ability to pivot if this thing is long-term hit? So for example, we had situations where there were sectors which were directly hit by COVID. So say fashion or retail, which were like directly hit. Food, so not food tech, but food restaurants and stuff like that. There the investor was asking questions on if I put money right now, how is the money going to be used if the COVID? So even then it's not that it didn't get investment. The questions changed. But sectors which were not impacted by COVID, they did really well. So we invested in several consumer brands. We invested in defense tech. We invested in life sciences. That's one of our key focus areas. Electric vehicles, space tech, content. So anything that is getting built got funded. So I don't see that to be a challenge. I don't see that to be a challenge even for the next round of funding. So what has started happening is that earlier we thought that this thing is happening only at our level, at the first stage, seed stage. Then we saw that there was an equal amount of money that was coming in even for series A, B, C, D. So I don't think there is, especially in terms of funding, I think this is one of the best times for anybody to raise money. Having said that, I would just like to go back to my first point on saying 1,000 startups versus 15 getting shot down. So even if that happens, you will need to have a very strong business model to be able to get out there and get the money. So it's not easy money, but there is no dearth of money.
That is new information. I mean, that is very important for startups to learn now. That it's the best year for startups to get funding. Amazing.
Yes.
So I'll just mute. Yeah. So Nandini, I have received a lot of interest from different angel investors which are looking to invest, but they are very much hesitant to do it for the first time. How do you tackle such situations, and how do you handle such critical situations where angel investors are scared to put in money because it's new for them?
So see, we face that all the time, right? Because there are several people who join the network and who've never invested. So that is why networks like ours exist. So that, see, if I was an angel investor, never done this before, and I was suddenly asked to put 1 crore in a company, I will not know how to even evaluate it. So I will, either make wrong choices and then later on say, startup investing doesn't work, or I will never put that money. The reason why networks like ours exist is because it's a platform. So what happens is that you are not taking an individual call on a certain startup. You will hear other experts. You will see, more importantly, you will see, you know, which companies are getting funded. So that's one of the key criteria, right? Where you said, if 2 crores are being raised and I'm a new investor and there are 5 deals and I see, oh, these 2 have already got 1.5 crores. So the understanding is that, you know, these are companies that I can put some money in. So that's how people start. You know, they look at, okay, which companies are already getting traction on our platform, and then they will start. So what we do is that, you know, we do stuff like, there'll be a pitch, then there will be a talk to the promoter, then we will actually start highlighting to investors, saying that, look, these are the companies where more investments have happened. So, you know, you will show, okay, 50% book has already been built. So and then investors start asking you more questions on saying, okay, which companies, you know, a newer investor will say, oh, which companies are already getting interest from other investors. Sometimes what also happens is that, you know, some investors start becoming what are called super angels or deal leads, you know. So people start following them. So there'll be people who will say, oh, if this investor is putting money, I'm going to put money. So a new investor will more often than not follow these strategies to invest rather than just going out on their own. And I actually recommend newer investors to not do deals on their own outside networks. So it doesn't matter whether ours or somebody else, but they need to understand this gradually. Get in, invest with others so that they understand how something like this is evaluated, and then they'll become more confident.
That's great. So do tell us. You mentioned your network is spread across the globe. Do you also have investors who are from outside India, maybe expats or citizens from the countries?
Yeah. So we are about 10 different countries outside of India, and these are wherever there are pockets of NRIs, people who are interested in the startup ecosystem. And what we've also started seeing is that first it was only the Indians who are outside who understood it, but now there is this whole referral thing that's working, where, you know, there would be a member, say, from Singapore, and who's an Indian, and then he will suddenly tell, you know, 5 of his other friends who are from other nationalities, and they start getting interested. So there we see increased interest from people from outside the country to invest in the startup ecosystem. And the only way that they can do this in a sustained way is to be a part of platforms like ours.
Truly amazing, because that's how, you know, Indian startup will get access to global funds then.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's happening. I don't think that's something in the future. It's happening right now only.
That's really great to know. So do share few secrets that, you know, you can share with the startups and entrepreneurs out there about funding. Like, how should they begin? How should they approach? Any tips or secrets for them?
Yeah. So I think one of the first things to do is to watch a lot of pitch videos. Do that. You know, it's very important for you to, you know, there are lots of pitch videos, Indian, global, etc. Also, then, you know, look at your deck. So first build a deck saying, what are the, so, you know, you will find these, guidelines on how these pitch decks are to be made. So make that. Then it is very, very important to keep practicing your pitch over and over again, because, you know, it's a problem with all founders, including me. So if you ask me to talk about my business, I will talk for an hour, right? But the investor on the other side has only 10 to 15 minutes. So how do you explain your business to somebody? And, you know, I remember that in, you know, earlier, and I'm sure all of you have also heard the elevator pitch on saying that, oh, you know, by the time you get inside and you come down, can you actually explain your business in 30 seconds, 1 minute? Try that. So you should have, you know, a 1 minute pitch. You should have a 5 minute pitch. You should have a 15 minute pitch. Nothing more than that. So like I keep saying that there is no experience or no CV in the world which should be more than a single page. Doesn't matter who you are. Yeah. Anytime you're building a CV which is more than a page, you're writing too much. Okay. The same thing applies for a startup pitch. Anytime you're talking more than 15 minutes, tops. I'm talking of, so this is the first meeting, right? Later on, if somebody gets interested and he says, oh, I want to understand your pitch better, then it's a different ballgame. But your first pitch cannot be more than 15 minutes, and you should also have a 5-minute ready. And you should do a lot of research. The good thing is that now there is a lot of literature available on the internet on how to do your pitch right. And do that, video record yourself so that you can see yourself talking over and over again. So it's a performance, right? And you have to get that performance. So if you tell yourself, oh, I can't perform, you've already got your probability of getting funded down. All of you need to perform. All of you need to be salespeople, and you need to sell yourself and you need to sell your idea. So that, I think, is the most critical piece. And also, I think you need to keep seeing these videos and keep trying to understand and saying, how does an investor look at a certain company? So understand that for an investor, the first pitch that you make is actually an elimination criteria, not a selection criteria. Because what is happening is that, say a network like ours, if there are 1,000 pitches, we are not trying to select. We are trying to say what doesn't work. So, we are like, no, yes, maybe. Or you're not saying yes, we're saying maybe. Then let's go deeper. So how do you actually cross that line? Is by making your pitch really sharp. Because that's the other thing I must mention is that don't try to get a meeting with an investor unless you have a pitch deck ready. So I see that mistake being made by a lot of people. They think that I'm going to try and contact somebody only if they are interested and they give me the meeting will I share the pitch deck. Not happening. You have to share your pitch deck upfront. So if you're doing like a cold call, say for example, if you're writing to us, and I invite all of you to send your pitches to us at pitch@mumbaiangels.com. So we see all. So it's not about whether it comes through me or whether we will see all pitches that come. So please send your pitches. You cannot say, listen, I have this idea. Can you give me a meeting? You have to write very crisp 2 lines and say, here is my pitch deck. Please let me know if you are interested. That's when we know that, look, you are serious about this and you've already done your prep. And when you are doing your pitch deck, 2 parts to it. You should have the deck and you should have the business model. So you don't need to send the business model right now. But you do need to have it ready with you so that if tomorrow, say assuming you get a call from an investor and say, okay, I like what you're doing, explain. You shouldn't start fumbling. You should be ready with your material so that you can pitch both things.
Thank you for sharing that, because coming from your end, it's very viable for startups to understand that you need to understand your business and share it within 5 minutes. So that's what our investor cohorts do. So we do investor cohorts every month, and we give startups only 15 minutes in front of multiple panel members, where they have to pitch their idea in 5 minutes, and 10 minutes, they have question and answers. So that is the idea that we are trying to get in, but we receive a lot of resistance from startups. Oh, I can't speak in 5 minutes. I need at least 30 minutes. So
no investor has 30 minutes. Yeah, no investor. So just to give you a sense of how we run our pitches, and this is so remember I said 1,000 to 15. So the 15 which are there, they get 30 minutes in front of this thing, of which 15 minutes is the pitch, 15 minutes is the Q&A, and we actually cut you at 15. So if you are at, so assuming you feel that no, this is extendable and 15 can go 20, it doesn't. We will cut you. So, and that's the way that most investors will look at it.
That is true. And thank you so much for sharing that with us today, your experience and your expectations from entrepreneurs and businesses out there. So let's take some questions from our audience, shall we?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you please help to understand this asset class investment for HNIs and wealthy individuals?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, uh, anybody who is, who's got a certain sizable portfolio should look at allocating about 5 to 7% of their money in this asset class. First important thing is to look at this as an asset class and not look at it as a, uh, investing and saying, oh, I will invest in one company because I understand it. Don't do it. So first is you look at 5 to 7% allocation. Secondly is, please join a network or a platform. I'm not saying us, anybody that you're comfortable with, but don't do it on your own, because what happens is that if you do this on your own, you will have what is called selection bias, because you will see only 10 companies and you will feel ki, oh, I can maybe invest in one of them, versus imagine us 1,000 to 15. So you need to see a large enough flow to be able to invest. Secondly, like I mentioned, start watching what is getting funded first initially. Invest in a couple of them and then you will understand how to do this. You need to build your portfolio to a size of minimum I would say about 20 to 30 companies over a period of say 3 to 4 years. You need to have that patience, because this is a patient capital. You're not getting your money back in 2 years. So you should also put that money, which if you lose, you should not feel you should not lose your sleep on. So that is why we say 5 to 7%. So I think those are the very critical pieces. 5 to 7%, don't do this on your own, do this through a platform. Initially invest on what is getting funded, and then build your own expertise in it.
Yes, thank you for that. So let's take another question. This is about the fashion industry that we discussed. So how would you suggest to get things better, and do you think this would be a good time that investor would be interested in investing in this industry, fashion industry?
It'll depend on what you mean by fashion. If you're saying fashion tech, or if you're saying, I'm trying to build AI, so we've seen these newer models where they will give you suggestions. They will. I've seen models where if a website is on, you can actually say, oh, do you want to buy these, or there is a lot of work that is going on size. So how do you tackle the size issue? So if you are trying to tackle questions which are long term, it doesn't matter what happens over the next 6 to 8 months, I think this is a very good time. It is also a very good time for e-commerce and fashion, because now even smaller brands which earlier were getting sidelined by the larger players in the market have started building their own niche. So if you think you have a niche to sell, I think it's a good time.
Great. So our next question is, many of the startup needs basic funding even after a capital investment from the directors to build their product and other expenditures. How do you recommend they get basic funding in pre-revenue stage and having traction just in the form of traffic?
2 places. One is to try and pitch to incubators and accelerators. So the good thing is that today the incubator accelerator ecosystem has started building in a very strong way in India, which was not there even say 5-7 years. So I think there are today easily about 200, if not more, incubators. So that's the place to look for pre-revenue funding. So first, of course, is friends, family capital, right? Or your own friends, family capital. If that is not available to you, then go the incubator accelerator. Don't go the angel investing route, because you will waste your time. So like what happens? There are 3 stages, right? There is this friends, family, stroke incubator accelerator. Then there is this angel investing, and then there are funds. So if you try and skip this and say, no, I will also go and look, say for example, you start doing the rounds with the funds, you'll waste your time and you'll waste, precious energy. Go to the stage at which the money is required and you will get success better. So incubators, accelerators is the way for pre-revenue companies.
So relating to that questions, when you say you receive a lot of startups applications, which is 1,000, and only 15 get selected. So there's a question: how many of these 15 are pre-revenue?
It'll depend on the sector. So, for example, if you are a consumer brand or you are a B2C brand, it can't be pre-revenue. You will have to show revenue for a consumer business. Pre-revenue will be in product-based investments where the investor is putting money for the R&D. So, for example, if in life sciences, you are saying, listen, I'm building a certain formula for a certain drug, or I'm building a certain device, and I need money for that device, and only when I have that device can it actually move. So those are the places where you will get the funding, or if you're building a tech product. But anything which is to do with sales, it's tough to do pre-revenue for us.
That's fair. So our next question is, this is interesting. So edtech industry is nowadays so crowded in COVID. Do you think that startup investors would be still interested to put in money in new edtech companies?
So we are seeing investments in edtech. It's not that we're not doing it, but you're right. What has started becoming more critical is to convince the investor that you're doing something different. If you are a Me Too who's done, very similar stuff, very tough to get that funding. It's becoming increasingly tougher, let me just say. But having said that, there is still investor interest in edtech because we see this to be still at a nascent stage. The potential of how technology will change education. You're still at a very, very nascent stage. But what you need to be able to convince the investor is that you have something which is unique and different.
Amazing. That's so interesting. So do also tell us, do you also co-invest with other networks or other funds that invest in the startups?
All the time. I just, I keep saying this, that the stage at which this industry is in, there are no competitors, there are only peers. Because we need to grow the investor base in this country by at least 10 times, at least. So like if today I map everything, us peers, everybody, we would say, we have about 10,000 investors, tops, right? You need to build it to at least 100,000 for an economy like ours, for us to say that yes, we have a vibrant seed stage economy. So there are no competitors. Every peer is trying to build the ecosystem in their own way, and we co-invest all the time. We co-invest with other networks, we co-invest with smaller funds, we co-invest with individuals who do deals on their own, we do co-invest with family offices, corporates, all the time.
That's really interesting and good to know. So the question is, what is your take on organic food business now that it's booming?
I see a lot of traction, and I see there is interest also. So this will actually sit in what I was calling the consumer businesses. So if you did an organic business, say 3-4 years back, and you got it to a network like ours, it would not get funded because people would be like, this is not scalable. How do you build this, etc. Now we have started seeing a lot of interest in it, where people say, okay, we will put the first 2 crores, help the brand build it to a certain level, but we understand that more funding will be required. So if, like I mentioned, in the consumer space, if you have a niche product and you're being able to convince the investor that, look, this is something that can be done well, you will get funding.
So because I am also, a freak of eating organic food or things like that, do you think this is just for the premium public out there, or the clean crowd, or if this can go into the tier 2, tier 3 cities? Looking at your experience, I would like to understand it from your end.
I think it's still a metro city phenomena. It's like, I can give you an example. I'm in Nasik, right? From Mumbai, if you just travel 3 hours away, the texture of what is available for food changes completely. So like I also eat only organic, so there's very limited supply. So I think it's going to take its time, but uh, it's a function of time. I think anything that's happening in metros is moving so fast into tier 2, tier 3, is that the pace is unbelievable. So it's just a matter of time.
That's true. So before we move out of the call, I would like to understand, or take your final takeaway, or anything that you would like to share with us and the entrepreneurs out there that would listen to you.
Yeah. So I think this is the best time in India to be an entrepreneur. So we are at that place where we are about to see exponential growth. Yeah? And all of you are best poised to build that. So I keep saying that, we keep talking of the Indian economy growing from 5 trillion to 10 trillion in a very short span of time. I'm absolutely convinced that growth is going to come not from companies that are listed on the stock exchanges today. That growth is going to come from companies that are not even born today. Yeah? And you guys are the people who are building those companies. You just need to make sure that you start becoming more aware of how to build companies, and not just do it as a passion, not just do it blindly. So like I mentioned, there is now enough literature out there in the market. There are enough international examples. There are enough forums, and cohorts which will fine tune your understanding. So, become better at building and faster building. So what you need to do is build and build fast. And today you have enough help available. So it's the best time right now. I think all of you should go out there and give it your all. And if any of you, like I mentioned, have any ideas, any businesses that you think are fundable, so please write to us at pitch@mumbaiangels.com, and we look at each of the proposals that come in. But send it as a ready proposal. Don't do half baked stuff.
True. So before we move on, Nandini, I would like to understand personally, what are your favorite sectors that you would prefer to invest in as an investor?
Oh, I love space tech. I see that to be a booming sector, and I would personally want to be, in some way part of space tech for the next, 100 years maybe. So I keep saying that, one of my dreams is to send 2 people to Mars on my own money. So let's see. So I think that there's a huge potential of it.
Wow, that's super unique. I was expecting cryptocurrency, blockchain, but space tech, this is amazing. Do tell us, before we go on, I would like to understand you as an individual. Do tell us about how your typical day looks like, be it a working day or in weekend.
Yeah, so I am an early riser. I wake up at 5 o'clock. I do meditation and yoga till about 8 o'clock or so. So 5 to 8 is, meditation, pranayam, yoga. And then I play with my dog and just hang around in the house. And then I start my work at about 9:30, 10. And I give myself a very clear deadline of 4:35. So I think it's very, very important for all of us to keep, a sense of balance in what you do. So anything too much will burn you out. So I do that. And then in the evening, I like to paint. So I'm sketching and painting. I like to do jigsaw puzzles. So anything which helps me create things. So those are the things that I do. Then I'm again an early sleeper. So I sleep off at, I'm known for dozing off at 9:30. So between 8 to 9:30 I also write. I think that's very important also, to keep a journal of your day. So it's because I think that's the time when at the end of the day, if you will just basically sit down and say, what did I do well, what did I not do well, what are the things that I could have done well. So it's not about beating yourself, but just doing a distance watching almost like saying, oh, third person watching, and put your this down and tell yourself that I'm going to keep watching. So if you notice that, oh, here is something I need to improve about myself, you need to keep watching it through the day, saying, oh, did I do this well or not? And give yourself that time in the day, end of the day before you sleep, to look at it. So I do that, and then I again meditate a little bit, and then I sleep. So that's
That is so amazing. So you are creative mind. You write, you sketch. That's so amazing to know. So I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much, Nandini, for your time. I am looking forward to learn a lot more from you, and looking forward to see you again.
Thank you, honey. I enjoyed myself. I hope that whoever was in this session, if they've taken even one thing away from her, and they can apply it in their businesses and life, I think this is an hour well spent. Thank you.
That is well said. I would really encourage everyone to look at our recorded session once again, and please take the key takeaways that Nandini mentioned, which are so insightful. Thank you so much, Nandini. Thank you for your time today. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Stay safe.